Hey there, this is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. Now, previously I created a video walking you through some of my production techniques in recreating The Weeknd's Call Out My Name. And in this video, I want to spend some time walking you through some of the vocal processing that we can hear on a lot of The Weeknd's productions. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. So I've put together a simple beat and a 808 bass line, which I got from a Beat Academy sample pack that I've put together, in which you can download absolutely free. Just click the link below in the description box. It comes loaded with construction kits, loops, one-shots, percussions, transition effects. It's yours absolutely free, so click the link below in the description box to download that. So we've got a simple beat and a dry vocal, so let's go ahead and listen to that. When we fall face down under the ground where you are. Now I have to start off by saying that 80% of what makes The Weeknd's vocals the way it is comes from the artist himself and his delivery, his tone, his timbre, everything about the uniqueness of his vocal performance in general. And so that's 80% of the battle there. And what we're focusing in on is on the 20% of the effect processing, the effects used on his specific vocal that allows it to really match the mood of the instrumental or the mood of the music that he's singing on. Let's start with the main effect that is very noticeable when hearing The Weeknd's vocals, and that's reverb. So instead of directly placing a reverb onto the vocal track itself, I'm going to place it on a return track B, so that I can send a little or a lot of this vocal to be affected by the reverb. So let's go to our audio effects folder, click reverb, and just drag and drop that over to your return track B. Make sure that the return track effect, the reverb, is set to 100% wet, because we're going to get the dry signal directly here from our vocal channel. So now we could just send a little bit of that vocal to the reverb. Now the way I like to start doing this is I'll just max it out, drench the vocal with the reverb so I can hear the tone, the texture, the timbre, the type of, the overall tonality of the reverb. And once I dial that in, I can now use this send knob here to balance it in the mix of the overall project. So let's start taking a look at the reverb. So there's a couple of things here in the stock reverb that comes with Ableton Live. I'm going to focus my attention on the pre-delay first, because I don't want the vocal to immediately be captured by the reverb. I want the vocal performance to start and then the reverb slightly delayed behind that. So let's crank up the pre-delay. And my train of thought is just always exaggerate and scale back. Now I'm going to leave the pre-delay there and immediately head over to the decay, because with the decay time set to where it's at now, it can be really hard to see some of the nuances that are happening with the other parameters. So let's bring the decay time down and start from there. Go back to the pre-delay and just give that a little bit more boost. So now it feels like a delayed verb, and that's kind of where I'm heading at here. Now a lot of the reverb on his vocals don't necessarily have a lot of that high shimmery high end in it. So I'm going to use the input processing, the high cut, to take a lot of the high end off of the reverb. And this is going to eliminate the high end coming into the reverb, so that's fine there. And now next I want to focus my attention over to the diffusion. And diffusion, if you want to think about it this way, the reverb that we're using is really to simulate an acoustic environment, right? The vocal, whether it's going to be a hall or a room, we're trying to emulate some kind of acoustic environment that the vocal is going to be in, so we can add dimension and space to this song. If we're doing a hallway, think of it as you lugging in some furniture, maybe some bookshelves, your next door neighbor's garage items, some farm animals, a bunch of people in there. And so with all those things added into the room, it affects the acoustic environment. It affects the way the reverberation bounces off of those things. So it's diffusing a lot of the reflections. It's diffusing a lot of the reverb. So when we crank the diffusion knob here over to the left, and we start to decrease the amount of diffusion, we're really hearing less of the actual reverb.
When we fall face down under the ground.
And not to be confused with the size, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but more so as how much reverb we're hearing. So the more we crank this over to the left, that means the more furniture or the more stuff we're just loading into this empty room. And the more we crank it over to the right, the more stuff we're actually getting rid of. So if you got a garage sale and now there's nothing in there, if any of you have ever been in this place, when you're moving and you go back and the room is empty, you clap, you hear the room, you're like, wow, reverb. But as you were living in that space and you had all the stuff there, you really didn't notice the reverb at all. That's what the diffusion is really doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to shape this actual texture of the diffusion network here with this reverb. And some reverbs will have this, but it'll just be displayed differently. So depending on what equipment or what stuff and furniture you're placing into this room, this can determine how it affects the reverb. Are those items going to take away the high end here, or is it going to take away a lot of the low end? And this could really create a nice tone and texture for the reverb itself. So I want to maybe just remove a little bit of the high end here.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
So this is going to give some more of that close, intimate room type like scenario here. But if I leave the diffusion all the way up, we hear a lot more of that emptiness, right? The empty room effect here. So let's probably just take away some more of that and just leave it here. And if we want to hear more of the actual reverb itself, but with the highs dimmed away, we can now crank the diffusion knob here.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
Now, not to get it confused with the decay time, because decay is the actual tail of the reverb. So how long we get to hear what we've just now done with the diffusion. So we've shaped the actual reverb, and now what we're doing is we're saying, well, how long do we get to hear the reverb effect? And that's the decay time. So when we crank this up,
when we fall face down under the ground where you are.
And then that can tie into the size of the room. Is it a small bathroom or a little, one small little bedroom here? Which gets more of that tin canny type of vibe? Or are we going with a hallway or a bigger auditorium type space? So the way I like to think of it is, the less instrumentation I have, probably the bigger size I want the vocal to live in. So a lot of the Weeknd stuff might be living in a hall or a plate type of vibe, and that will probably set the size of the room around here.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
And then there's a global quality here, and this just determines on the CPU usage, and so it's set to economic. So I'm going to set this on high, so we just get a little bit high fidelity of this reverb.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
And I want this to be a little bit wider. So I want it to take up a lot of space since it's just really just the drums, the 808, and the vocal, which is typically a lot of the productions you hear with the Weeknd. It's very minimal at times. So let's go ahead and increase the stereo depth here. We're going to go to 100, maybe even past 100 a little bit, and see what that gives us.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
Now I want a little bit more of the tail, so I'm going to go back to the decay time and just crank that up.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
And I could now scale back the send here. And so what I'm going to do is unsolo the vocal and now work on sending the vocal. We have our reverb set in place. Let me see what it sounds like with everything else.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
So I probably want a little bit more decay to just have it linger a little bit longer. It is a little bit too, let's just open it up so it's not so dark. Maybe let a little bit more of the high end in there. And lower the diffusion a little bit. Maybe the reverb itself is just too loud.
When we fall face
And so if I'm hearing too much of that reverberating that's happening, we can go ahead and lower the diffusion.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
And so you can go back and forth between messing around with the decay and the diffusion. And that's what I like to do sometimes. Just see shorter decay and more reverb.
When we fall face down.
And so that combination really makes the reverb stand out more. So the reverb becomes more of the spotlight or the focal effect. And then, you know, if I wanted it to last a little longer, you can use the decay, crank the decay time a little bit. So you can kind of just mess around and get the right balance. Now, once I have that reverb in place, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of delay. And we have a ping pong delay here on a return track A, meaning that the ping pong is going to focus and sending the signal from the left and then to the right of the stereo imaging. So it'll make it nice and wide, and that's what we're trying to do here with this vocal. So let me go ahead and crank some of that and send some of this vocal to the return track A.
When we fall face down.
So I'm just going to use the onboard filter in this ping pong delay to just make sure that I'm not having any of the high end or a lot of that low end energy from that vocal getting captured in the delay and traveling left and right. So let's make sure that it's just really that midsection there. And it's set to an 8th note here.
When we fall face down.
And now all we're going to do is just kind of scale it back. So we're just going to have a hint of that delay. We want to kind of just more feel it than hear it.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
Next, I'm going to be using Ableton Live 10's Echo to create more of a modulating double effect that we're going to run the vocals through as well. And I have that on my return track D. So what I've done is I've dragged and dropped an echo and set it from sync over to time and just crank that over here to about 14 milliseconds. What I'm trying to do is get a really, really short delay time here. You've got this nice visual display here, you know, letting you know how many actual delays that you see. So I just want this really, really short. And what we're trying to do is create this nice chorusy type of effect. So I'm leaving the delay type on stereo, and we're going to have, you know, almost 30 or something % feedback. And once again, we're not going to have any of the highs and any of the lows being affected here. And so that's important because I want that to be present with the dry vocal. I want the dry vocal to have that and not to be affected with the vocal stuff, the effects processing. So here is the vocal, and let's just crank some of that over to the echo.
When we fall face down under the ground.
And what I've also done is I headed over here to the modulation section, and I've increased the modulation so that we're hearing it go back and forth, left and right, as well as doing some filter modulation.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
So the cool thing is it's giving this nice little smearing effect. So I'll go ahead and...
When we fall face down under the ground where you are.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have just a little bit of the vocal go through that. And then I'm going to head over to the reverb that we've created and head over to the bottom where I see the send effect D. And by default, Ableton Live will have this area grayed out. So I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to hit enable send. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the reverb vocal through the echo as well. So I'm going to send a little bit of that. So that means that the vocal is going to this reverb, the affected vocal with the reverb is now going to get sent a little bit to this echo.
When we fall face down under the ground where you are. In this cold place.
This is without it.
It's so hard to be sound over and over again.
So it's very, very, very subtle, but it does this nice, cool stereo, like smearing. It's like blurring it a little bit, and it's a cool little technique to do with some of the reverb. You can also add some distortion, some overdrive on another return track, and repeat the same process, so that you can send a little bit of that reverb to the distortion and just have that tucked away in the bottom for certain parts and automate that throughout the thing. So as we wrap up, we realize that reverb and messing around with the diffusion and the decay and all the parameters in the reverb play a big role in getting this atmospheric sound that we hear in the Weeknd's productions, as well as adding some delay and a little bit of that modulating stereo effect so that we can have it smeared and add some stereo depth. Now, as my gift to you for watching this video, I've compiled a vocal chain that I'm using on the vocals that we used in this video. It's pretty straightforward. You just simply drag and drop this vocal chain onto your vocal, and with the turn of the knobs here, I have everything already set to the parameters that I like to use when using these devices. So bright vocals, some de-essing, and really helps just to get the vocal in a good starting spot. And this is yours absolutely free. Just simply click the link below in the description box. Also included with this vocal chain is a sample pack that I spoke about earlier in the beginning of the video, which includes kits, loops, one-hits, percussions, everything really that you need to hit the ground running making music. And it's 100% royalty free, and it's absolutely yours free. So you can download both of these by just clicking the link below in the description box. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.